I saw
The
you.
Mafia Boss
Don't lie to
first
me.
noticed Claire
You're
Bennett
imagining
because she
things.
almost hit his
Settle
car,
I'm not.
called
This
him
is
expensive
over.
Then leave.
traffic,
Now.
and threatened to turn him into dessert before she had any idea men in 3 counties lowered their voices when they said his name. Daniel Moretti had stepped out of a black SUV outside the Vale retirement party, expecting fear, respect, or at least the careful silence people gave dangerous men after sunset. Instead, he found a woman in a green dress gripping a little boy's hand, cheeks flushed with rage, eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall, and one hand already waving him out of her way like he was a badly parked grocery cart. Behind her, from the front steps of the old country club, Patricia Vale was still screaming about a car that did not belong to her. In front of her, Daniel Moretti stood still enough to make the night feel colder. Claire looked him up and down once, took in the black suit, the polished shoes, the expensive watch, the men behind him, and snapped, "Move your dramatic parade." Some of us are trying to leave with our dignity and a child who still needs bedtime. For one long second, no one breathed. Then Daniel laughed, not loudly, not warmly, just one low, surprised sound, like something human had escaped him by accident. Claire had not meant to be brave. She had meant to get her son into the Porsche, get away from Patricia Vale's voice, and cry later in a hotel bathroom where Noah could not see. There was a difference. Courage sounded nice when people told stories about it. In real life, it often felt like shaky hands, a tight throat, and the deep need to keep moving, because stopping would break you open. Noah stood beside her, small fingers wrapped around hers. His blue blazer twisted at one shoulder from the way she had pulled him through the crowd. He was quiet, which worried her more than questions would have. Noah usually had questions for everything. Why did shrimp curl when cooked? Why did old men at parties smell like pepper and furniture polish? Why did rich people laugh like they were checking whether everyone else had heard them? But now he was silent, staring at the red Porsche Cayenne, as if it had become part of the argument. The Porsche was hers. The bakery was hers. The brownstone was hers. Ruth's table was hers down to the last flour-dusted tile and brass drawer handle her grandmother had chosen before Claire was born. And still, one cruel woman with pearls around her neck had managed to stand in a room full of people and make Claire feel like a guest in her own life. Patricia Vale had smiled while doing it too. That was the worst part. Mean people with ugly faces were easier. Mean people with soft voices and good manners could cut you in public and make everyone think you had leaned into the knife. The retirement party had started beautifully, which somehow made it worse. George Vale's family had rented the Fairfax Grove Club, a white-columned building with wide lawns, glowing windows, and waiters who looked like they were trained to apologize before anyone complained. Claire had arrived with trays of rosemary biscuits, bourbon peach tartlets, lemon cream cakes, and tiny chicken pot pies made from Ruth Bennett's recipe, the one that still had butter stains on the card, and a note in her grandmother's looping handwriting that said, "Feed people like you expect them to remember how it felt." Claire had believed, foolishly, that good food could make the night simple. She would serve, smile, accept the check, kiss Noah on the forehead when he got sleepy, and go home to the apartment above the bakery that smelled like cinnamon, even when nothing was in the oven. She should have known better when Patricia hugged her at the door with one arm and patted her side like she was checking the softness of bread. "Claire, sweetheart," Patricia had said, loudly enough for 3 women nearby to hear, "you look so confident in that dress." There it was. Confident. The word women used when they meant large, when they meant bold for someone like you, when they meant they were surprised you had not hidden yourself in navy fabric and apologies. Claire had smiled with all her teeth. "Thank you, Patricia. You look very expensive." Patricia's eyes had flickered. Claire had counted that as a small victory and gone to arrange the dessert table. For the first hour she worked. Work was easy. Work made sense. Pastry did not care about gossip. Custard did not ask who really paid your bills. Doe did not look at your body and decide whether you deserved romance, respect, or a fair chance. Claire moved between the kitchen and the ballroom with her sleeves rolled up, checking temperatures, refilling trays, making sure the lemon cakes did not dry under the lights. Noah sat near the side table with a plate of biscuits and a book about planets, swinging his feet and looking proud every time someone praised the food. That should have been enough. It almost was. Then Mark Vale arrived. Mark came in late, the way men did when they wanted everyone to notice they had arrived. He wore a grey suit and a smile that said he had practiced kindness in mirrors without understanding what it was for. He kissed Patricia's cheek, clapped his father on the back, and let his eyes travel over Claire's body with the lazy confidence of a man who thought every room belonged to him if he could afford the lighting. "Claire," he said, "still holding on to that old building?" Claire wiped her hands on a towel. "Still holding on to my old building." Mark smiled wider. "Sentimental properties can be such a burden." "Then you must be exhausted," Claire said. "You seem very attached to things that aren't yours." His smile did not disappear, but it changed shape. Patricia appeared at his side as if summoned by insult. "Now, Claire, Mark has only ever wanted to help. You know, some people might be grateful to have a man with his experience, taking interest in their future." "My future is busy making miniature crab cakes," Claire said. "It does not need a man in commercial real estate hovering over it." A few people nearby chuckled, before realizing Patricia was not laughing. That was when the evening shifted, not loudly, not all at once, just a tiny tilt in the air. Patricia began moving from group to group, with a glass of white wine and a wounded expression. Claire watched her lean close to women in diamonds, watched their eyes move toward the food table, then toward Claire, then away. She heard pieces as she passed. Ruth was a dear woman. Such a shame. Mark tried so hard. Some people simply cannot manage money. The building would have been lost years ago without guidance. By the time George Vale stood up to make his speech, half the room was looking at Claire with the soft, satisfied pity of people enjoying a scandal they could call concern. George Vale thanked his guests. He thanked his wife. He thanked his son. He thanked the community for trusting his family for more than 30 years. He spoke about stewardship, legacy, responsibility, and preserving neighborhood character, which Claire found rich, coming from a man whose son had been trying to turn her block into glass apartments with a rooftop pool no one from the neighborhood could afford to use. Then George looked toward Claire and smiled. "And of course, we thank Claire Bennett of Ruth's Table for catering tonight. Her grandmother was a lovely woman. Our families go back a long way. We are always happy to support those who need a hand." The applause was polite. Claire felt each clap like a fingertip pressing into a bruise. Noah looked up from his book. "Mom, did they help us?" Claire forced a smile. "No, baby. They hired us." Patricia heard him. Of course she did. Cruel people had excellent hearing when children were involved. She drifted over in pale pink silk, crouched beside Noah, and touched the back of his chair. "One day, sweetheart, you'll understand how much your mother has been given. A roof over your head does not appear by magic." Claire went still. There are moments in life when a person can swallow insult because the room is full, the check matters, and a child needs shoes in the next size. Claire had swallowed plenty. She had swallowed comments about her weight, her laugh, her stubbornness, her single motherhood, her business, her clothes, her car, her right to own anything beautiful without a man's name attached to it. But Patricia had put the lie beside Noah's ear. Patricia had taken a grown-up cruelty and handed it to a child like candy. Claire set down the tray she was holding, carefully, quietly, because if she had not set it down carefully, she would have thrown it. "Do not lie to my son," she said. The room did not go silent all at once. It rippled into silence, table by table. Patricia rose slowly. "Excuse me? I said do not lie to my child. You did not buy my building. Mark did not buy my car. George did not save my business. My grandmother left me the brownstone. I built Ruth's table. And the only thing your family has given me tonight is a headache and a very clear reminder that money cannot purchase manners. Someone gasped. Mark laughed under his breath. George's face hardened, but Patricia's went pink with fury. "You ungrateful little woman," Patricia said. "You stand here eating from the hand of people who have protected you for years, and you dare speak to me this way?" "I made the food," Claire said. "So technically, you are eating from mine." That was when Patricia lost the last thread of her polished voice. She ordered Claire to leave, not asked. Ordered, as if Claire were a servant who had spilled wine, instead of a business owner who had been hired and insulted in the same evening. Claire did not argue. She turned, took Noah's hand, and walked toward the kitchen to collect her bag. Behind her, Patricia kept talking. Claire heard words like unstable, vulgar, difficult, embarrassing. Those words followed her through the service hall like old ghosts. She had heard them before from teachers, customers, men on dates, women in dressing rooms, strangers who thought fat meant available for public review. Tonight, each word hit differently, because Noah was hearing them too. At the coatroom, he tugged her hand. "Are we poor, Mum?" Claire bent down so fast her knees protested. She cupped his face in both hands. "We are not what they said. Understand me? Ruth's table is ours. Our home is ours. That car outside is ours. People sometimes lie about things they want but cannot have." Noah studied her with serious eyes. "Do they want our house?" Claire almost said no. She almost chose comfort. Then she saw Patricia through the glass doors, marching after them with Mark behind her, and something cold passed through her chest. "Maybe," she said softly. "But wanting is not owning." Outside, the night air was sharp enough to clear her head. Claire opened the Porsche door and helped Noah climb in. Patricia came down the steps in heels that clicked like tiny attacks. "Leave the car," Patricia shouted. Claire turned slowly. "What?" Patricia lifted one trembling hand and pointed at the Cayenne. "Do not make this worse. Mark has been generous enough. You will not drive away in a vehicle connected to my family while behaving like trash in front of our guests." The world narrowed. Claire heard Noah's seatbelt click. She heard Mark mutter, "Mom, don't." But he did not step forward. He never stepped forward when the lie was useful. Claire reached into her purse, took out her keys, and pressed the unlock button again, just to make the red lights blink. "This car," Claire said, "has my name on the title. The loan was paid off with money from my grandmother's trust. If you want to stand in a parking lot and scream about it, please do. I have excellent hearing and a lawyer with very little patience." Then she got into the driver's seat. She was shaking too hard to start the engine on the first try. That made her angrier. She would not let Patricia Vale see her fall apart. She would not let Noah think lies became true when rich people shouted them near chandeliers. She took one breath, then another, started the car, and pulled away too fast. That was when the black SUV turned into the driveway. Claire hit the brakes. The Porsche stopped inches from the SUV's front bumper. A man stepped out from the back seat before his driver could open the door. He was tall, dark-haired, calm in a way that did not look peaceful. The two men behind him scanned the parking lot before they scanned her, which should have warned her, but Claire was past warning. He looked at the Porsche, then at her, then toward Patricia still shouting near the steps. Claire rolled down her window. "Are you part of this expensive traffic problem, or can you move?" The driver's face changed. One of the men behind the stranger actually reached toward his jacket before the tall man lifted two fingers. Everyone stopped. Even Patricia, for once, stopped talking. The stranger leaned slightly toward the window. His eyes were dark and unreadable, but not cold. That bothered Claire later. Cold would have made sense. "You are in a hurry," he said. "I am in several things. Claire said. A hurry, a mood, a dress with no pockets. None of them improve when mysterious men block driveways. His mouth curved. Mysterious. You arrived in a black SUV with backup singers. The man glanced at the men behind him. They dislike being called that. They can file a complaint after they move. Daniel Moretti laughed then, and the sound carried just enough for the people on the steps to hear it. Mark Vale's expression changed first. His smugness drained into recognition. George went pale, in a slow, careful way. Patricia's lips parted, but no words came out. Claire noticed all of it, and understood none of it. The man stepped back, and gestured for his driver to move the SUV. Safe drive, Miss Bennett. Claire's fingers tightened on the wheel. I didn't tell you my name. No, he said, but they were shouting it. Then forget it. I rarely forget things that interest me. That sounds like something a villain says before buying a cape. This time, the driver looked genuinely frightened. Daniel only smiled. Good night, Claire. She should not have liked the way he said her name. She did not like that she liked it, so she rolled up the window and drove away. Noah waited until they reached the main road. Mom? Yes, baby? Was that man famous? Claire looked in the mirror. The black SUV was still at the club entrance. Daniel Moretti stood beside it, watching the red Porsche disappear down the road, like he had just seen a door open somewhere he had not known one existed. I don't know, Claire said, but he has the posture of a man who owns too many coats. Noah considered this. He laughed when you yelled at him. I did not yell. You kind of yelled. I used firm customer service. Noah smiled a little. It was small, but Claire took it like medicine. She drove to a hotel near the highway, because going home felt wrong while Patricia's voice was still in her ears. Ruth's table sat on the ground floor of the brownstone, warm and dark now, its front windows painted with gold lettering her grandmother had chosen. The apartment above had Noah's dinosaur sheets, Claire's overworked laptop, and a refrigerator full of half-finished cake fillings. It was home. It was safe. It was supposed to be safe. But tonight she could not shake the feeling that unseen hands had been touching the locks. At the hotel, Noah fell asleep after 2 cartoons and half a muffin Claire had packed from the party in a napkin, because even in emotional collapse, she refused to waste good lemon crumb. Once his breathing settled, Claire sat on the bathroom floor with the fan running and called Elena Morales. Elena answered on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep and immediate suspicion. Someone better be dead or getting sued. Can both be future options? Claire? I need you to look at my property records, car title, business accounts, and anything connected to Vale Development. Also, I may have threatened an old woman with legal consequences while wearing catering flats. Elena was quiet for one beat. Where are you? Hotel. Noah is asleep. I'm fine. People who are fine do not call lawyers from hotels after midnight. I am fine, adjacent. Elena exhaled. Tell me everything. So Claire did. She told her about Patricia's comments, George's speech, Mark's old pressure to sell the brownstone, the car accusation, the way people had looked at her like she was a woman, pretending ownership over things someone else had given her. She did not mention the man in the black SUV at first, because he seemed separate from the humiliation, like a strange ending to a terrible night. But Elena caught the pause. What else? She asked. Claire rubbed her forehead. I nearly hit a man's car. Insurance? No contact. Police? No. Then why did your voice change? Claire looked at the closed bathroom door. Everyone at the party looked scared of him. His name was Daniel Moretti. Elena went silent in a way Claire did not enjoy. Elena, please tell me you did not yell at Daniel Moretti. I did not yell. I compared his men to backup singers. Oh, Claire. That sounds bad. That sounds very you. And yes, bad. Claire leaned her head against the tub. Who is he? A man you do not want curious about you. Well, too late. He called me interesting with his face. His face should mind its business. My thoughts exactly. But after they hung up, Claire did not sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed and watched Noah breathe in the weak blue light from the television. Her anger had cooled into something heavier. Patricia's lie had been ugly, but it had also been strangely specific. Leave the car. Mark has been generous enough. George thanking her like a charity case. Rumors that all pointed in the same direction. Not random cruelty. A story. Someone had been building a story around Claire for months, maybe longer. A story where she was helpless, dependent, unstable, grateful, and finally ready to hand over what Ruth Bennett had left behind. By morning, Elena had already pulled the first records. The deed was clean. The brownstone was fully in Claire's name. The Porsche title was clean. The bakery accounts were mostly ordinary. Mostly. That word arrived in Elena's voice over the phone while Claire stood in the hotel lobby waiting for coffee. There are payments leaving one of your reserve accounts through a processor I do not like. Claire turned away from the front desk. What kind of payments? Small enough not to scream. Regular enough to matter. They are labeled as vendor service fees, but the routing path touches a company tied to Mark Vale. The lobby seemed to tilt. Mark has been stealing from me? I am not saying that yet. Elena, I am saying money left your business account and passed through a system connected to him. That is what I can prove before breakfast. Claire closed her eyes. For a second, she smelled her grandmother's kitchen. Brown sugar, coffee, orange peel. Ruth Bennett standing at the stove, round and strong, and laughing at people who mistook kindness for permission. Don't let anyone make you small, just because they cannot imagine you full-sized, baby. Claire had not understood then how often the world would try. She checked Noah out of the hotel, drove him to school, and went straight to Ruth's table. The bakery looked innocent in daylight. Morning sun fell across the old brick front. The sign above the door glowed soft gold. Inside, the chairs were still turned upside down on the tables, the pastry case empty, the chalkboard waiting for the day's menu. Claire unlocked the door and stood there for a moment, listening to the building settle around her. This place had survived 3 storms, 2 recessions, 1 electrical fire, and Ruth Bennett's habit of adopting every lonely person within walking distance. It would survive Patricia Vale. Claire tied on her apron, washed her hands, and began making dough. By noon, the bakery smelled like butter and cinnamon. By 3, customers had come and gone, some kind, some nosy, several pretending they had not already heard a version of last night's disaster. Claire smiled, served coffee, packed cupcakes, and did not throw 1 ceramic mug. She counted that as growth. At closing, she locked the front door, turned the sign and leaned against the counter with her eyes shut. That was when someone knocked. Not a customer knock, not a neighbor knock. A calm, patient sound that assumed the door would open eventually. Claire looked through the glass. Daniel Moretti stood outside Ruth's table in a black coat, holding nothing, smiling at nothing, with the whole street somehow quieter around him. Claire opened the door 3 inches. We're closed. I can read. Then enjoy the sign. I came to talk. Most people start with hello. Hello, Claire. Her stomach did something deeply unhelpful. Goodbye, Daniel. She started to close the door. He placed 1 hand against it, not pushing hard, just enough to stop it. His hand was large, clean, and very still. The Vales are not only insulting you, he said. Claire stopped. Move your hand. He did immediately. That mattered. She hated that it mattered. She opened the door wider but did not step back. Say what you came to say. Daniel looked past her into the bakery, at the wooden tables, the old photographs on the wall, the glass case, the flower on her sleeve. Something in his face changed, not softness exactly, recognition maybe, as if he knew what it meant for a place to belong to someone. "George Vale owes money and loyalty to men who want part of my city," he said. "Your building is the last piece they need on this block. If Mark can make investors believe he controls it, he can borrow against a future he does not own. If Patricia can make people believe you depend on them, your refusal begins to look like instability instead of ownership. If your accounts become messy enough, they can call you irresponsible. If your reputation breaks enough, they can offer to save you." Claire stared at him. The bakery hummed softly behind her. The refrigerator motor clicked on. Somewhere upstairs, the old pipes knocked like Ruth's ghost had kicked them. "You're telling me this because the people trying to take from you are connected to people trying to take from me. Convenient. Yes. At least you admit it. I find lies boring." Claire gave a short laugh. "Rich men always say that right before choosing the useful version of the truth." Daniel's eyes stayed on hers. "You do not trust me. I met you last night in a driveway while your backup singers glared at me. They are still unhappy about that." "They'll heal." His mouth twitched. "I can protect you." "No. You did not ask what that means." "I know what men usually mean when they say protection. They mean rules for me and satisfaction for themselves." Daniel did not answer quickly. That, too, surprised her. Most men rushed to defend themselves when accused of being like other men. Daniel only looked at her as if he had heard every word and disliked how much of the world had made it true. "What will you accept?" he asked. Claire folded her arms. "Information, names, documents if you have them, warnings if danger gets close. You do not get to own my choices because your enemies wandered into my life." His gaze dropped briefly to the flower on her wrist, then returned to her face. "You negotiate well for a baker, and you threaten gently for a crime lord." The air changed. Claire realized what she had said a second too late. Elena had not used that exact phrase, but she had used enough careful words for Claire to understand. Daniel Moretti was not merely wealthy. He was not merely dangerous in the ordinary polished way of men with lawyers and drivers. He belonged to the darker architecture of the city, the part people pretended not to see until it touched their doorstep. Daniel did not deny it. Instead, he said, "Do you want me to leave?" Claire should have said yes. Every sensible part of her lined up behind the word. But upstairs was her child's room. Beneath her feet was her grandmother's building. In her accounts, money had been moved by hands she had not authorized. Across town, Patricia Vale was probably telling someone Claire had finally cracked, and in front of her stood a man who could have forced his way in, could have crowded her, could have frightened her with silence alone, but had asked a direct question and waited for the answer. "No," Claire said. "I want you to come in, sit at that table, and tell me exactly what you know. But if you call me sweetheart, little lady, or anything that sounds like I need rescuing, I will charge you $12 for tap water." Daniel stepped inside. "Understood. And wipe your shoes. This floor is older than your attitude." For the second time since she had met him, Daniel Moretti laughed, like he had forgotten the sound belonged to him. He sat at the nearest table while Claire went behind the counter and took out a notebook. She did not offer coffee. Then, after 30 seconds of watching him sit there too still, too dark, too oddly patient beneath the warm bakery lights, she sighed and poured him a cup anyway. "Do not look pleased," she said, setting it in front of him. "This is not hospitality. This is caffeine with boundaries." Daniel wrapped one hand around the mug. "Boundaries suit you. Everything suits me. I'm very versatile." "Yes," he said quietly. "I noticed." Claire looked down at the notebook because the room had become too warm. Outside, evening settled over Fairfax County. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Ruth's table held its breath around them as Daniel began speaking names Claire had never heard, companies that sounded clean until they were not. deals hidden behind polite dinners and charitable donations. Claire wrote everything down. Her hand shook only once, when he mentioned Mark's redevelopment file and the block map showing her brownstone circled in red. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. "Claire," he said. She did not look up. "Keep talking." "You are afraid. I am busy. Those can happen together." She pressed the pen harder against the paper. "I have been laughed at, lied about, stolen from, and told to leave my own car in a parking lot by a woman shaped like a perfume ad. Fear can wait its turn." Daniel was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I do not rescue women who can clearly set a room on fire with a look." Claire looked up despite herself. There it was again, that almost smile. Not mocking, not sweet, something worse, something curious. "Good," she said, softer than she meant to, "because I am not looking for rescue." "No," Daniel said, "you are looking for proof." Claire tapped the notebook. "Then start with that." And for the first time all day, while the bakery lights glowed against the dark glass and the city outside kept moving like nothing had changed, Claire Bennett felt the shape of the war around her. Not the whole thing, not yet, only the edges. The Vale family had taken her kindness for weakness, her body for a joke, her bakery for a stepping stone, and her silence for surrender. They had made one mistake. They had done it in front of her son. And now, across a small wooden table dusted with flour, the most feared man she had ever insulted was giving her names. Daniel gave Claire names until the coffee went cold, and the bakery windows turned black enough to show their reflections back at them. He did not speak like a man trying to impress her. That would have been easier to resist. He spoke carefully, cleanly, giving her pieces and waiting while she wrote them down, as if her notebook mattered as much as his power. There was Vale Development, which everyone in Fairfax knew because Mark had plastered his smile across charity breakfasts and ribbon cuttings for 10 years. There was Mercer Street Holdings, which sounded like a company that owned office chairs and parking lots, but according to Daniel, had no staff, no real office, and 3 different addresses that all led back to men who preferred not to be photographed. There was a payment processor with cheerful branding and a customer service number that went nowhere after 6 in the evening. And there was George Vale, retired in public, busy in private, borrowing against deals he had not yet closed and promising people access to a block that had one stubborn brownstone standing in the middle of it, like a brick refusal. Claire wrote until her fingers cramped. She did not interrupt except to ask for spellings, dates, and whether Daniel knew the difference between evidence and terrifying gossip delivered in a nice coat. He did. Annoyingly, he did. He slid 2 folders across the table near midnight, both thin, both neat, both more useful than any threat he could have made. One had public corporate filings Elena could verify by morning. The other had names Daniel warned her not to use yet, because truth was not helpful if it got a person killed before it reached the right room. Claire did not like that sentence. She liked even less that she believed him. At one point, he looked toward the staircase that led to her apartment. Noah was asleep upstairs, his sneakers lined near the door, his backpack slumped against a chair, his whole small life resting above men's plans, as if childhood were not supposed to be protected from adult greed. Daniel followed her gaze but said nothing. That was one of the first things Claire noticed about him after the fear settled. He knew how not to fill silence. Most powerful men hated empty space. They rushed to own it with opinions, orders, jokes, or warnings. Daniel let silence sit between them until Claire decided what to do with it. When the clock over the pastry case reached 1 in the morning, Claire closed the notebook. "You should leave." Daniel looked at her. "You are tired." "I am also correct." He stood without argument. That surprised her too. She hated how many small things about him kept surprising her. He buttoned his coat, picked up neither cup, and did not glance toward the cash drawer, the office door, or the stares like a man assessing weakness. He only looked at Claire. There will be men across the street tonight. Her eyes sharpened. Excuse me? For protection? No. They will not come inside. They will not speak to customers. They will not follow you. No, Claire. No, Daniel. You do not get to decide that my life now comes with shadows because you think it is safer. His jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in all that polished control. The veils are tied to people who do not send polite letters when challenged. And I am tied to a son who needs to wake up tomorrow in his home without seeing strange men watching our door. Daniel went still. The answer had landed exactly where she meant it to. Not as a slap, but as a boundary with a lock on it. He looked toward the window, then back at her. One car, end of the block. You will have the number. If you call, they come. If you do not call, they do not move. Claire studied him. You negotiated that very quickly. I am learning. Do not sound pleased with yourself. It is 1 in the morning, and I have butter in my hair. His mouth curved. You do. She reached up, horrified, and found a smear near her temple. Daniel's smile deepened by one dangerous degree. Claire pointed at the door. Out. He left laughing quietly, and that should not have stayed with her after the lock turned. But it did. It stayed while she washed the cups. It stayed while she checked the back door twice, and then a third time because the world had suddenly grown corners. It stayed when she went upstairs and found Noah sleeping sideways, one arm over a stuffed dinosaur, mouth open, completely unaware that his mother had just invited a Mafia Boss into their bakery and argued him down to one car at the end of the block. By morning, Elena arrived with 2 coffees, a laptop, and the expression of a woman who had already decided several people deserved legal pain. She sat at the small office desk behind the kitchen, opened the folders Daniel had left, and went quiet, in a way Claire did not enjoy. Elena was rarely quiet. She cursed at printers, judges, online portals, and anyone who used the phrase mutual benefit in a contract. Silence from Elena meant the paper was serious. This is not enough to win by itself, Elena said after 20 minutes. But it is more than enough to start pulling threads. Good threads? Expensive threads, the kind that make men call their lawyers before lunch. Claire leaned against the filing cabinet. Mark? Mark is sloppy. His company touched the processor. Maybe he thought you would never look. Maybe he thought you would look and be too embarrassed to make noise because Patricia already trained half the neighborhood to believe you were being helped. Either way, we are freezing what we can freeze, flagging what we can flag, and requesting records from the bank before anyone gets inspired to erase things. Claire nodded. She wanted to feel victorious. Instead, she felt tired in a deep place. He told investors he had my property, didn't he? Elena's face softened, which Claire disliked almost as much as silence. I think he suggested he had influence over it. That is a fancy way to say yes. Yes. Claire looked through the office doorway at the bakery. Sunlight had begun to reach the front tables. Ruth's old photograph hung beside the register, a black and white picture of her grandmother, laughing with both hands deep in a bowl of dough. Claire stared at it until her eyes burned. They made me look small first. Elena closed the laptop halfway. What? That was the point. If people believe I am helpless, then Mark saving me looks generous. If people believe I am unstable, then taking control looks responsible. If people believe I owe them, then my no sounds ungrateful. Claire laughed once, but it had no humor in it. They did not start with the deed. They started with my name. Elena stood and reached for her hand. Then we take the name back first. That was how the war began. Not with gunfire. Not with men shouting in dark rooms. With bank notices, certified letters, corporate searches, quiet calls to accountants, and Claire Bennett standing behind her bakery counter with flour on her apron, while 3 different customers tried to ask about the retirement party without admitting they already knew too much. She gave them coffee and nothing else. If they wanted gossip, they could chew on air. Daniel returned that evening after closing. He knocked once and waited until Claire unlocked the door. This time, he brought a paper bag from a restaurant so expensive Claire had once walked past it and assumed the bread basket came with a credit check. She looked inside, saw 3 foil containers, and narrowed her eyes. "I did not ask for dinner." "No." "Is this protection disguised as pasta?" "It is pasta disguised as dinner." "That means nothing." "It means I was hungry and assumed you forgot to eat." Claire stared at him. Her stomach chose that exact moment to make a sound loud enough to betray family secrets. Daniel did not smile, which saved his life by a narrow margin. She took the bag and pointed to a table. "Sit." "Do not make this romantic." He sat. "Would I know if I did?" "No. That is exactly the problem." So it began, strangely and against Claire's better judgment. Daniel came after closing, with information, warnings, and occasionally food. Claire gave him coffee and arguments. Elena verified what could be verified. Daniel's people watched from far enough away that Noah did not notice. And when Claire found out one of them had been standing too close to the front door, she put him behind the counter folding pastry boxes until his large hands looked personally offended by ribbon. Daniel heard about it and called her impossible. Claire told him impossible women were the reason men learned manners. The city around them remained ordinary on the surface. Children came in after school for cookies. Office workers bought sandwiches and pretended not to look at Daniel when he sat in the corner in a black coat, reading contracts like they had insulted his mother. Noah began setting a toy truck beside Daniel's coffee whenever he visited, not as a gift, he explained, but as a parking permit, because Daniel looked like the kind of man who needed rules. Daniel accepted this with grave seriousness. By the 3rd week, 3 toy trucks had been lined across his side of the table. By the 4th, Noah had driven one over Daniel's polished shoe and made engine noises, while Daniel continued discussing shell companies with Elena as if this were normal. Claire watched those moments carefully. She trusted behavior more than charm. Charm was easy. Patricia had charm. Mark had charm. George had built half his public life from charm and borrowed money. Daniel did not perform softness well enough for it to be fake. When Noah interrupted, Daniel stopped speaking. When Claire said no, Daniel heard it, even when he disliked it. When Elena challenged one of his claims, he gave her more records instead of acting offended. A lonely man, Claire began to realize, could look a lot like a dangerous one from a distance. Daniel was both. That was the part she could not forget. The first real confrontation came sooner than expected. Mark showed up at Ruth's table on a rainy afternoon, wearing a navy suit and a smile that made Claire want to throw a muffin at his head. The lunch rush had just ended. Noah was at school. Elena was in court. Daniel was not there, which Claire told herself was good because she did not need him. She stood behind the counter with a towel over one shoulder and waited. "Claire," Mark said, "we need to talk before this gets uglier." "The weather?" His smile tightened. "You know what I mean. I rarely know what men mean when they walk into my business uninvited and use the word uglier." He glanced around the bakery, at the customers still lingering near the window, at Ruth's picture on the wall, at the old pressed tin ceiling and warm lamps. "This place means a lot to you. I understand that, but sentiment cannot protect you from reality." Claire leaned her palms on the counter. "Reality has been doing a poor job introducing itself. Maybe you can help." Mark lowered his voice. "My family has covered for you longer than you know. My mother should not have said what she said at the party, but the core issue remains. You are in over your head. The accounts prove it. The property taxes, the repairs, the processor problems. A woman in your position needs structure. A woman in my position owns the floor you are standing on. For now." The bakery went quiet. Mark seemed to realize he had said too much, but not enough to regret it. Claire felt fear slide up her spine, soft and cold. Then the bell over the door rang. Daniel entered without rushing. He took in Mark, Claire, the customers, the rain on the windows, and the fact that Claire's hands were flat on the counter instead of moving. His face did not change, but the room did. People who did not know his name still felt him. Mark knew his name. That was obvious from the way his shoulders stiffened. "Mr. Vale," Daniel said. Mark swallowed. "Moretti, this is a private conversation." Daniel looked at Claire. Not Mark. Claire. "Is it?" That question did something to her. Something small and dangerous and warm. He could have taken over. He could have stepped in front of her and filled the bakery with his reputation. Instead, he asked. Claire straightened. No, Mr. Vale was leaving. Daniel turned back to Mark. "Then it is a short conversation." Mark's face flushed. "You do not understand what you are involving yourself in." Daniel's voice remained calm. "I usually do. You cannot scare everyone." "No," Daniel said, "but I rarely need everyone." Mark left with rain on his shoulders and hate in his eyes. Claire exhaled only after the door closed. Daniel watched her. "You handled him." "I know. I came in because I heard the word taxes from outside." "You heard taxes through glass?" "I heard his tone. That is either impressive or deeply annoying. Both, I suspect." Claire wanted to laugh. Instead, her hands started shaking. She tucked them under the towel, but Daniel saw. He always saw. He stepped closer, then stopped before entering the space behind the counter. "May I?" The question was so simple that it nearly broke her. Claire nodded once. Daniel came around slowly and stood near her, not touching at first. When she did not step away, he placed one hand gently on the edge of the counter beside hers. Not over her hand, beside it, a presence, not a cage. He said, "For now," she whispered. Daniel's eyes went dark. "I know. I hate that it scared me. Fear is information, not weakness." Claire looked up at him. "Did you learn that in mafia school?" "No. From watching brave people survive things they should not have had to survive." For once, she had no joke ready. The evidence grew from there. Elena found duplicate service fees, then altered processor agreements. Then an investor memo where Mark described Claire's property as under favorable acquisition conditions. Daniel's people found George's meetings with Mercer Street Holdings. The rival faction behind the money began pulling back the moment Daniel's name became too close to the paperwork. Criminals, Claire learned, adored risk in theory and hated receipts in practice. Dr. Evelyn Carter entered the story because Elena said they needed a neutral room before the legal knives came out fully. Evelyn Carter was not a therapist, not exactly, and not a judge, not officially. She was a mediator with silver hair, calm eyes, and an office full of plants that looked better adjusted than most people. She had handled family disputes, business wars, estate fights, and the kind of private arguments wealthy people paid extra to keep quiet. Claire liked her immediately because Evelyn offered tea, then said, "No one is required to drink it. I believe forced comfort is still force." The meeting happened on a grey morning, with rain tapping against Evelyn's windows. Claire wore a deep blue dress, gold hoops, and lipstick Ruth would have called "Don't Start With Me" red. Elena sat on one side with folders stacked before her. Daniel sat beside Claire, not at the head of the table, not between her and the door, not in front of her like a shield she had not requested. Beside her, close enough that she felt the quiet force of him, far enough that the room could see she still owned her own voice. Patricia arrived first, stiff in cream wool, her mouth pinched around an apology she clearly hoped to weaponize later. George came next, smiling like a man entering a photograph. Mark followed, carrying smugness like luggage. Megan Vale, Mark's sister, did not attend that day. Claire knew her mostly as a woman who treated family cruelty like a social sport. She was grateful for one less veil in the room. Patricia looked at Daniel, then at Claire. This is unnecessary. Claire opened her folder. Then it should be quick. George gave a soft laugh. Claire, no one wants conflict. Your grandmother would be heartbroken to see this. Claire felt Daniel's stillness beside her, but he did not speak. Good. She had asked him not to rescue her from sentences. She turned one page. My grandmother would ask why you were using her name while trying to steal her building. The room went quiet. Mark leaned back. That is a serious accusation. Yes, Claire said. I brought paper. And then she laid it out. The deed in her name, the clean inheritance records, the Porsche title, the bakery ownership, the reserve account withdrawals, the processor routing, the investor memo, the language Mark had used to suggest control he did not have, the payments disguised as fees, the meetings George had denied. The story Patricia had spread, one soft little lie at a time, until Claire became smaller in other people's mouths. Patricia tried to interrupt 3 times. Evelyn stopped her twice. The 3rd time, Daniel turned his head. Let her finish, he said. 4 words. No threat, no raised voice, no hand on the table. Still, Patricia went pale. Claire looked at him. Daniel's eyes stayed on Patricia, but his body remained angled toward Claire, as if even his warning belonged to her boundary. He did not take the folder. He did not explain for her. He simply made space for the truth to keep breathing. Claire continued. When she finished, Mark's face had lost its handsome confidence. George looked older. Patricia looked furious, then frightened, then furious again, because fear offended her pride. This is a misunderstanding, Patricia said. I spoke out of concern. Claire has always been emotional. Ruth worried about her. We all did. Mark tried to help because someone had to. Daniel's hand rested on the table. Claire could feel the anger in him like heat from a closed oven. But he waited. Claire closed the folder. No, Patricia, you did not worry about me. You underestimated me. Those are not the same thing. Patricia's mouth opened. Daniel spoke before she could pour another lie into the room. His voice was soft enough that everyone had to listen harder. Claire told the truth before I entered this room. I am only here to make sure no one punishes her for it. The words settled over Claire in a way she did not expect. She had been defended before, sometimes loudly, sometimes badly, usually by people who wanted gratitude afterward. This was different. Daniel did not make himself the hero of her proof. He did not turn her story into his performance. He stood beside the truth like a locked door behind her, not one in front of her. That was the moment her feelings changed shape. They had been chemistry before. Banter, curiosity, dangerous warmth. Now they became trust, and trust frightened her more than attraction. The fallout was not instant, but it was steady. Elena moved fast. The suspicious accounts were frozen before Mark could redirect them. The bank opened a fraud review. Investors began backing away from Vale development with the clean panic of people who did not want subpoenas near their brunch reservations. George lost support from the men who had funded him because Daniel made sure they understood George had exposed their interests through arrogance and poor paperwork. It turned out that criminals disliked incompetence almost as much as betrayal. Patricia issued a written apology that sounded like it had been dragged through broken glass by 3 attorneys. Claire sent it back with red notes in the margins. An apology without ownership, she wrote, is just reputation management in a nicer dress. Over the next months, life became almost normal again, except normal had changed. Ruth's table got busier because Scandal, Claire discovered, sold muffins as long as the muffins were excellent. People came in with awkward support, nosy sympathy, and occasional shame. Claire accepted money for pastries from all of them. Growth did not require refusing profit. Daniel remained, not in a grand way, not with declarations or jewels or black cars blocking the curb. He remained by learning the shape of her life. He came after Noah's bedtime some nights and helped her stack chairs. He listened while she complained about wholesale vanilla prices. He stood in the kitchen while she taught him to frost cupcakes, holding the piping bag like it was an explosive device. "Relax your wrist," Claire said. "My wrist is relaxed." "Your wrist looks like it's interrogating the frosting." Daniel looked down at the lopsided swirl. "It is not cooperating. It is buttercream, Moretti. It cannot betray you. You say that because it likes you." She laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter. He taught her things, too. How to read a room when silence changed. How to notice which person near an exit was watching hands instead of faces. How to tell when a friendly conversation had teeth. Claire told him she had survived school fundraisers, bakery Yelp reviews, and mothers who believed gluten-free meant made of air, so dangerous rooms were not as special as he thought. Daniel told her PTA meetings sounded lawless. She told him he would not last 10 minutes. Noah adored him in the quiet, uncomplicated way children adored adults who did not talk down to them. Daniel never tried to become his father. Claire respected that more than she could say. He helped with homework when math got dramatic. He accepted imaginary parking tickets. He let Noah line toy trucks across his shoes during long conversations. Once, Claire found them sitting on the courtyard steps while Noah explained dinosaurs in great detail, and Daniel listened like the future of his organization depended on understanding the difference between a carnivore and an herbivore. But Claire kept boundaries, carefully, stubbornly, sometimes painfully. Daniel could walk her home, but he could not decide when she needed walking. He could send security for an event, but only after asking. He could kiss her in the bakery kitchen after closing, once the lights were low and the city had softened outside, but he could not mistake her softness for surrender. The first kiss happened beside the sink with flour on the floor and rain at the windows. He had just admitted, with great reluctance, that her cinnamon rolls were better than the ones at a restaurant he owned part of. Claire called that personal growth. Daniel said she confused victory with pastry. She stepped close to him before she could overthink it. He went very still. "Are you going to ask permission for everything?" she whispered. His eyes lowered to her mouth, then returned to hers. "With you? Yes." That should not have undone her. It did. She kissed him first. His restraint lasted 1 perfect second, and then his hand rose to her waist, careful and warm, asking even after her answer. Claire had been desired before. She had been grabbed at, looked over, measured, praised in ways that sounded like surprise. Daniel kissed her like her body was not an exception to beauty, but a country he was grateful to enter. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his chest and tried to pretend she was not shaking. "I am still not yours," she said. His hand moved gently against her back. "No." She looked up. That was not an invitation to say something poetic. I was agreeing. Suspiciously fast. "Claire." His voice was low, almost rough. "I do not want you because you belong to me. I want you because you do not." She had no defense against that. None that worked. Still, love did not turn Daniel into a simple man. There was one night, months later, when danger brushed too close, and he forgot the lesson. A car followed Claire for 6 blocks after a late supplier meeting. Daniel's men intercepted it before it reached the bakery. No one was hurt. The driver had ties to one of George's old contacts, more warning than attack. But Daniel arrived at Ruth's table with ice in his face and command in every line of his body. "You and Noah will stay at my house tonight," he said. Claire stood behind the counter. "Try again." "This is not a discussion." The room froze around those words. Daniel seemed to hear them after he said them. His jaw tightened. Claire felt the old anger rise, not hot, but clear. "It becomes one, or you leave." His eyes flashed. "You were followed." "I know. You could have been taken." "I know." And you want me to ask gently while men decide whether you are reachable? Yes, she said. Because if your fear makes my choices disappear, then your protection starts looking too much like their control. The sentence hit him hard. She saw it. She also saw how badly he wanted to argue. He could have. He had reasons, real ones. Fear had sharpened him into the version of himself other people knew. The one who moved pieces, closed doors, gave orders, and called it survival. Then he stepped back. The breath Claire had been holding escaped. Daniel looked at the floor, then at her. I am sorry. She said nothing. He swallowed. I want you and Noah somewhere safe. I said it badly. I said it as an order, because I was afraid, and I am used to fear becoming obedience. Claire's throat tightened. He continued, each word slower than the last. That is not your burden. May I ask again? She nodded. Would you and Noah consider staying somewhere safer tonight? My house, Elena's, a hotel, anywhere you choose. I can place men nearby if you agree. If you say no, I will not force you, but I will hate it quietly. Claire almost smiled. You'll hate it quietly? With discipline. That sounds difficult for you. It will build character. She chose Elena's guest room that night, partly because it was sensible, and partly because Daniel had asked correctly. He did not punish her for it. He drove behind them at a distance Claire approved, and left after Noah fell asleep on Elena's sofa with one shoe on. The next morning, he showed up with coffee, bagels, and a written security plan that had 3 options and one line at the bottom that said, "You may reject all of this, and I will remain irritated but respectful." Claire kept the paper in her nightstand. The final public test came at Noah's birthday party in the courtyard behind Ruth's table. By then, the legal war had mostly ended. Mark's deal had collapsed. George's retirement had become less peaceful than advertised. Patricia had begun volunteering in places where cameras were not allowed, which Claire privately considered the first useful thing the woman had done in years. Repayment had begun. The reserve account was whole again. Ruth's table stood exactly where it had always stood, only brighter now, with new flower boxes, fresh paint on the back gate, and a courtyard full of people who loved Noah loudly. Claire wanted the day to belong to her son, not to the Vales, not to gossip, not to Daniel's world or hers. Just Noah, turning 8, wearing a paper crown, running between tables while bakery workers, neighbors, school friends, Elena, and a careful handful of Daniel's people ate too much cake. Daniel stood near the dessert table holding the cake knife because Claire had handed it to him while adjusting a tray, and he had accepted the responsibility like a sacred duty. Noah opened gifts beneath string lights. He got books, toy trucks, a telescope, art supplies, and a dinosaur sweatshirt he immediately put on despite the warm afternoon. Claire watched him glow and felt something in her chest loosen. For once, no adult disaster had stolen the center of his day. Then Megan Vale arrived. She had been invited by Patricia, which Claire learned only when Patricia appeared at the gate looking apologetic, in a way that suggested she knew this might go badly. Megan walked in wearing white linen and the cheerful expression of a person who considered cruelty a form of conversation. She greeted Noah sweetly, kissed Patricia's cheek, and accepted lemonade from a bakery worker without saying thank you. Claire felt Daniel's attention shift from across the courtyard. She shook her head once. Not today. He stayed where he was. For 20 minutes, Megan behaved. Then Noah ran past with frosting on his cheek and shouted that this was the best party ever. Someone laughed. Patricia smiled with real softness. Maybe that was what annoyed Megan. Maybe she disliked seeing peace where her family had failed to control the story. She lifted her glass and said lightly, "Well, I suppose every property war needs a winner." The courtyard quieted. Claire turned slowly. Before she could speak, Daniel set down the cake knife. Not loudly, Not dramatically, just metal against porcelain. A small sound, clean as a bell. He looked at Megan. There was no property war. Megan's smile faltered. I was joking. No, Daniel said. You were repeating a lie in a child's birthday party and hoping politeness would protect you. The air went still. Claire's heart beat once, hard. Daniel continued, voice calm enough to be terrifying and clear enough to be kind. The property was always Claire's. The bakery was always Claire's. The car was always Claire's. The lie existed because your family wanted power over something they did not earn. Megan went red. That is not your place to say. Patricia stood. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. Actually, Megan, it is the truth, and you will stop. That silence was different from all the others. Not fear, not shock, something shifting. Something old finally stepping aside. Claire looked at Patricia. Patricia did not look proud of herself. Good. Pride would have ruined it. She looked ashamed, which was better. Shame, at least, could become a door if someone stopped decorating it. Megan left 10 minutes later. The party recovered slowly, then all at once, because children have very little patience for adult tension when cake remains available. Noah blew out his candles. Daniel stood behind Claire, not touching her until she reached back and found his hand. His fingers closed around hers. Gentle, warm, waiting. That evening, after the guests left and Noah fell asleep upstairs surrounded by new books and half his toy trucks, Claire and Daniel stayed in the courtyard cleaning plates. The string lights glowed above them. The brick walls held the day's warmth. Somewhere beyond the gate, the city moved on, unaware that a small brownstone had survived a war without ever becoming anyone's prize. Daniel dried a plate and stacked it carefully. Megan should not have been allowed inside. Claire rinsed another fork. Probably not. I wanted to remove her. I know. I did not. I also know. He looked at her. Does that count as growth? That counts as you not kidnapping a party guest. So yes, we celebrate small steps. His smile appeared, rare and quiet. Claire leaned her hip against the sink. Thank you for what you said. It was the truth. Yes, but you said it in public. Daniel's eyes softened. Affection in private is easy. Claire stared at him for a second. That is annoyingly beautiful. I can ruin it with something arrogant. Please don't. I'm tired. He placed the towel down. Claire. She knew from his voice that something had changed. Not badly. Seriously. She turned. Daniel stood in the courtyard of Ruth's table, sleeves rolled, tie gone, hair slightly disordered from Noah putting a party hat on him earlier. He looked less like the feared man from the black SUV and more like someone who had been invited into a life and was still careful not to step on anything sacred. I love you, he said. Claire's breath caught. He did not move closer. You do not have to answer tonight. Oh, shut up, she whispered and walked into his arms. He laughed against her hair, and she felt it all through him. Claire held on, not because she needed rescue, not because he had won her, not because danger had become romance and erased every sensible fear. She held on because he had stayed, learned, changed, asked, listened, and stood beside her when silence would have been easier. She held on because love, the real kind, did not make her smaller. It gave her more room to breathe. A year later, Ruth's table hosted its first neighborhood dinner in the courtyard. No fundraiser, no retirement party, no polished speeches about generosity from people who confused charity with ownership. Just long tables covered in mismatched cloths, bowls of pasta, baskets of bread, peach tartlets, lemon cakes, children running between chairs, old neighbors arguing about parking, and Noah handing out napkins with the seriousness of a tiny mare. The brownstone looked beautiful in the evening light. The bakery windows glowed gold. The cherry-red Porsche sat at the curb, freshly washed because Noah had insisted Daniel learn the correct way to clean wheels. No one called it marks. No one called Ruth's table a charity case. No one looked at Claire like she was borrowing her own life. Patricia came and helped refill water glasses. She did not make speeches. That helped. George did not come. Mark had left town months earlier, chasing another deal in another city where people had not yet learned to count their spoons after he visited. And Megan remained uninvited. Elena sat near the herb planters drinking wine and pretending not to enjoy being thanked by half the neighborhood. Daniel's men stood nowhere obvious because Claire had made that rule clear, and Daniel had followed it. Claire stood near the kitchen door watching Noah move from table to table. He had grown taller. His cheeks were round from stolen frosting. His laugh filled the courtyard, bright and careless, exactly the way a child's laugh should be. Daniel came to stand beside her, with a dish towel over one shoulder. "You're wearing that wrong," Claire said. "I was told I am on dish duty." "You are. That towel is not decorative." He looked around at the noisy, warm, flour-dusted chaos, at the neighbors passing plates, at Noah handing napkins to men who once made other men nervous, at Claire's hands dusted with sugar, her hair pinned badly, her body soft and strong, and completely her own. His expression turned quiet. "I'm grateful you let me come home," he said. Claire felt the words land gently, like something finally placed where it belonged. For a moment, she let herself be sentimental. Only a moment. Ruth would have allowed that much. Then she picked up a stack of plates and handed them to him. "Don't get sentimental, Moretti," she said. "You're still on dish duty." Daniel took the plates and smiled like a man who had once owned fear and somehow found something better in a bakery courtyard behind an old brownstone that had never needed saving. And Claire Bennett, who had been underestimated for most of her life by people who mistook softness for weakness, watched him walk toward the sink and knew the truth had done more than protect her building. It had cleared the room around her heart. The Vales had wanted her smaller, quieter, grateful for scraps from her own table. Instead, she had kept the brownstone, the bakery, the Porsche, the recipes, the laughter, the child, the name, and the life her grandmother had trusted her to hold. Daniel had not saved her from herself. He had not claimed her victory as his own. He had stood beside her while she told the truth, and when the truth asked something of him, he changed. That was the part that mattered, because love was not ownership. Protection was not control. Trust was not restored by pretty words, public apologies, or strong arms around fragile moments. Trust was earned slowly, in choices no one clapped for. It was earned when a man powerful enough to command a room chose instead to ask permission. It was earned when a woman tired of standing alone finally found someone who stood beside her without blocking the light. It was earned in paperwork, in patience, in corrected lies, in boundaries kept, in plates washed after dinner, and in the quiet miracle of coming home without having to give yourself away at the door.